The Clowntown
Welcome
Chronicle,
back, everybody, to
a
another
show that
episode,
gives you
another
a
very
laugh
special episode
around the
indeed. So
wilderness
special, we
and
had to do it
insanity and
twice.
all that media
I'm here
trash.
with
If it's slop you
Newsfist,
want,
the
we got
brainwashing
newspapers, it's
respecter.
cringe you want, we got parades of it.
Yes, I am a great respecter of the brainwashing. When the brainwashing comes calling, your best respect. You don't want to be the kind of person who just pretends that brainwashing isn't a thing, right? You know, you want to read your Orwell. You want to get all up inside the brainwashing. That's how a modern society is run, don't you know?
Oh, yes. Newsfist is a man who apparently wears many hats, including a tinfoil one. You know, because I brought him on and I was like, oh, he's a history guy like me. And then we finished up the last interview and he was like, I have this entire theory of brainwashing and how society is run by agitation and anxiety. And I was like, now you're speaking my language, buddy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually came across like an old CIA document that was basically saying exactly the same thing. It's like from the 70s or something. I'm like, oh goddamn, of course the CIA beat me to it. But basically my theory sort of like, goes thusly, right? So everybody in a modern society thinks that the way I can't believe people still believe this, but right, okay. So imagine you're a normie, right, on the street. You're the man on the Clapham omnibus, right, as the Brits say, okay, right? And you think, well, government is there to do good things for the people, right? Like that's its purpose. That's what they want to do. No, bad, wrong. That's not how that works. Now, a little bit of theory is probably useful to describe why government doesn't work like this anymore. And to this, I would like to give a bit of a shout out to Oron McIntyre and his book, The Total State, which is a sort of collection of various historical political writers who have sort of made this point, but Oron sort of like, weaves it all together very, very well. Okay. The basic assertion of the idea of the total state is this, okay? Because of the way democracy works, the way to power is through the opinions of the people, okay? This coincides with the fact that you can't really run a country if you are actually changing leaders every 4 years, right? You just can't do it. No modern country, particularly operating at scale, can actually replace everyone in power in every 4 years. It just doesn't work that way, right? Which means that you inevitably wind up with what you would call the administrative state, the deep state, the swamp, the people who exist in like the civil service, who are there for like 30, 40 years, who are appointed and not elected, right? You following me so far?
Yep, I'm with you.
Okay. So the upshot of the fact that the way to power is through the opinions of the people means that everything that influences those opinions must be controlled by the ruling elite or the government, depending on sort of, if you're one of those people who believes that the government is the ruling elite, or, perhaps the ruling elite is outside of government, because after all, who really wants to be part of government now? Ooh, cringe. So what happens is that rather than being a sort of a small thing, right, the state where it just like say does tax policy and the military and generally kind of keeps itself to itself, the state begins to expand outward to encompass every single thing that might affect the opinions of the voter base. Okay, right? So the media, books, religion, especially, just anything that might change the opinions of the people and thereby endanger the path to power for a particular elite. You get me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then you wind up with a situation where you need to get the people to do stuff. Okay, so an election's coming up, right? Or you've got some thing that you really need everybody to get on board with. Well, how do you accomplish this? Okay, I mean, you could try, telling the people sort of, in plain and simple language, nobody fucking believes that, right? Like if you seriously believe, right, that is how government rules, then you need a freaking lobotomy. No, what moves people is emotion, right? Lenin was all about this. I mean, I really dislike Lenin, but dude, you know, he was right about a lot of stuff about like mass psychology and stuff, and I hate that he was so correct. You know what I mean? You know, like,
Oh yeah.
you know, it's a common thing these days. They're like, you look up the sky and you're like, yeah, the sky is blue, and they'll be like, yeah, well, you know who else said the sky was blue? Hitler. And I'm like, listen, man, I'm sorry, okay, but if Hitler accurately said that the sky was blue, right, then that was an accurate statement. It doesn't matter that, you know, Hitler said it or Mao said it or Lenin said it, right? It is a true observation. Okay, so then you get to this position where the easiest way to actually move people to do a thing, right, is to keep them in a constant state of free floating anxiety. Okay. This free floating anxiety needs to be like constant. It needs to be like refreshed. And most importantly, there must be like an electrical charge. Okay. Right. That you keep insulated. Right. And you make sure that most of the time there is no outlet for this charge. Okay. Then when you want the people to do something, right, you open up like a crack in the insulation and you give everybody a thing to focus on. This is very, very 1984. This is very, very the 2 minutes hate kind of thing. And then all of that free floating frustration arcs out in like this sort of electrical flash towards the thing that you have sort of deemed to be the enemy of the moment, the current thing, right? This has been memed to death, of course, on the internet because people can instinctively see this process happening even if they don't understand the deeper stuff before it. So, you know, for a while it was COVID, then they retired COVID and they're like, oh, you know, it's Ukraine now. And, you know, I guess in the US now it's ICE, okay? But the point is that under this method of governance, you don't actually want the people to be happy. This is actually like going to be bad for you. What you want is free floating anxiety always. And another great thing that you can use to move the population is to promise to relieve them from all the bad shit that you're doing to them. How do you know the desires of the public? Well, it's easy. You're the one doing all the bad shit to them. It's like, you know that taxes are too high, right? You know that like everything's like going to shit, right? And you every so often you roll out and you're like, hey, I bet the public would really enjoy it if we stopped doing this thing and this thing and this thing. Well, how do you know? Oh, well, because we're doing it, right?
Right.
And then everybody rushes. They're like, oh, that, you know, because what people want is relief from this free floating anxiety. This is one of the reasons why they love to roll out this term like a conspiracy theory, right? Because the whole idea is that there must never be a simple way to relieve the antagonisms, the anxiety of the people, right? People get like, rah, 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 this thing's really bad, right? And the government, what do they always say? Oh, it's very complicated. There's no simple solutions, and there are simple solutions. The problem is that those simple solutions would generally involve removing from power certain groups of people. And of course, they're not going to do that. Okay. So instead, they sublimate and they divert these urges of the people into an outcome that they want, right? Whether it's COVID lockdowns or, the war in Ukraine. And you can see this very, very clearly because when they do this, it is never logically consistent. So for example, under COVID, everybody had to stay at home until it was time for the BLM protests, right? And then they're like, oh, well, actually, you can go and protest for BLM. That won't spread the virus, right? Or racism is bad, right? We must all exist in diversity, except for the Russians. Fuck the Russians. You can be as racist as you want to the Russians. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you real quick, because this is a clearly very well-developed theory, and I can say that because it aligns well with my theory, which I was also developing during COVID. And I remember sitting around a campfire with a bunch of friends and trying to explain this to them, and they just thought I was insane. Because
yeah, I get that a lot too.
It sounds insane, but
yeah.
I think you arrived. Well, I'm going to ask you, how did you begin to start thinking about this, was it just COVID or was it something you read?
It was it was a whole bunch of stuff. Like I for the longest time, actually, right? So like you could say that my entire focus for most of my life has been to try and figure out who it is that actually rules us, right? What their objectives are, and what are the mechanisms by which they exercise their power. Okay, because one of the problems, of course, of modern society and democracies and generally is that true power is basically occulted, right? Like nobody really knows who makes the decisions, and if you in modern Western democracies, this has just reached sort of complete fever pitch to the point where no one has really any idea, right, who's controlling stuff, right? They roll out these sort of figurehead leaders like okay, let's talk about the UK. Okay, so you've got the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who's like a complete idiot and douchebag, and he is just really there to draw the ire of the people. He's basically said himself, right? You get into office and then you discover that you can't do anything because it's not you're not designed to be able to do anything, right? So our elected leaders essentially just become magnets for people to blame for the fact that nothing changes, because nothing can change because the people who actually exercise power are, behind the scenes, right? And it just started striking me that I think a lot of it was after I read the Total State. I can't recommend that book highly enough, by the way, right? Um, if you think about the way society works, it would be much more accurate to describe methods of governance through the lens of mass psychology than the lens of my democratic society.
Yes.
I go and I cast my vote. Oh, I mean, you cast your vote. Oh, who's a good little boy? Did you cross your fingers and wish really hard when you cast your vote? See, whenever I go and cast my vote, right, I scrunch up my eyes real tight and I cross fingers on both of my hands, and like I make a little wish, and I'm like, please, God of democracy, please let my vote count. It's bullshit, right? I'm sorry,
right. I've thrown my vote down a wishing well for years now. Just I stand by it and I wish upon a star and I say, Jiminy Cricket, make me a real boy, and I throw that down in the well and everyone cheers and I feel like I did something. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Well, I totally agree with you that the strategy now is not democracy or reason. Like, we were both atheists, right? We know when people said reason, what they really meant was just not Christianity.
Yeah.
Anything that will put a chain around some of my appetites, like anything but that.
Yeah.
No, rational democracy and voting and all of this crap, it's all just a game. It's silly. It's a dream. But to get back to what you were saying, mass mind control, that's the way to go. Now, how is it done?
Well, it seems like it's basic, like it's essentially the process that I described. Okay. We live in a society that is ruled by what Machiavelli would have called the foxes. Okay, right. So Machiavelli, pretty sure this is in the Prince, right? Talked about there's two different kinds of rulership, right? There's the foxes and the lions. Okay, so the foxes, they lie all the time. They conceal their motives. They're very, very sneaky. This is what a lot of Western governance is like. But to put a picture that the listeners can understand, right? At the moment in US politics, the Democrats are the foxes, and the Republicans, or Trump mainly, are the lions, right? So the lions, by contrast, they are open with their motives. They tend to use a lot more force. They'll just come out, they'll just do things. And the foxes and the lions are essentially in perpetual conflict. And if you get too much of either kind in a government, it will inevitably start to tend to slide back towards the other. At least this was Machiavelli's contention. I think he's right, because if you have a government entirely full of foxes, right? They say the right words always, um, but people eventually notice that their actions do not line up with their words, right? If you have a government of lions always, sooner or later a fox will come along and just lie to the people. This is one of the big problems with democracy, and especially with universal suffrage, right? Is that you can just lie to people, right? You can just lie to people and promise to give them money. This is increasingly how a lot of Western democracies work, right? You have like a client groups. You promise to give them money. The most obvious example of this, of course, is America and the black community, right? You're just like, you vote for me, I'll give you money. Now that's supposed to be banned under a democracy, right? You're not supposed to be able to do that, right? But functionally speaking, that's always how it winds up working. So you just wind up in this situation where the actual motives of government are completely obscured, and every single person who says that they get into government, oh, for the best reasons, I just want to get elected so I can help the people, I don't want to enrich myself. Bullshit, right? The reasons why people seek power in office are generally um self-enrichment, self-aggrandizement, um you know blackmail, coercion, all of these things. The number of people who actually do sort of embody that sense of like public service, which is what it's supposed to be, it seems to be vanishingly small, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller since the around 2020, when they started doing the purges, right?
Right.
A lot of people might not be aware of this, but there were essentially two very important political purges that happened around 2020. So the first was the racism purge. In America, this sort of manifested itself in the army, for example. If you'd ever tweeted like a Pepe the Frog picture, you were out, right? Because you were right wing. If you ever said anything that might be construed as even slightly racist, you were out. And then, of course, after that, they had the vaccine purge, where like anyone who would not demonstrate their fealty by taking the vaccine, and let's be clear, that's essentially what it was. Everyone who took the vaccine demonstrated physically that they were willing to go along with it, right? And this its action is very, very important, because you might say that you trust the science, right? But how do we know that you trust the science, right?
Exactly.
Some sacrifice is required. We require action from you. To me, I'm pretty sure Orwell says this, right? To merely say the slogan is not enough. You must demonstrate that you are willing to sacrifice for the slogan. And that's really what the COVID vaccine was. Everybody knew it was bad for you, right? Like on a fundamental level, right? I don't know anyone who was like, oh yeah, I had that vaccine, I like felt great. Everybody who took it got sick afterwards. But they viewed it as a form of collective sacrifice, right? If I undergo this sacrifice, then I will be released from the lockdowns and all of these things, which goes back to my original point. Okay, they set this entire thing up, right? They instituted the rules, the lockdowns, and then they said to you, there is only one pathway out. This is how they do it, right? They set the field. It's a bit like you got a bunch of people in a house and you set the back of the house on fire, and there are other ways out of the house, but you've blocked all of them up. Okay, and now you control the only way out of the house, and the only people you're going to let out of the house are those who are willing to swear ideological fealty, if you get what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. And to add something to that, I think COVID had and it's amazing because it feels like COVID's finally coming up again, and people are like, hang on, what the hell was that? Like it felt like we all just wanted to get on with life for a while, and now it's starting to pop back up again. And I thought I was the only one becoming interested in the topic again because, I spent my days, screaming my head off about all this stuff to my friends and family, like, don't do this, please don't do this. Uh, Nobody listened at the time, and that's fine. I understand that I sounded like a crazy person, but I recently heard the vaccine thing described as a compliance, credulity, and IQ test all rolled into one.
Yes.
And I was like, yes. And now for me, all I could think of was it was a consciousness test. It was almost like a sounding device, like that they wanted to, you know how they measure depth in a boat? They drop a little weight
Yep.
and they check all that stuff. I was like, they want to see how deep or how awake the zombie horde is. And I know that sounds like, again, conspiracy theory stuff, but honestly, knowing what I know about mass psychology, that's exactly what it was.
It's not it's not weird to say that at all. If you do you know the difference between professed preference and revealed preference? You heard about those terms?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so in political psychology, in political science, this is quite an important idea. Okay, right? So professed preference is what people say they want or say they are going to do. Okay, right? And the reason why this is important in political science is when you have an election. Actually, there was an election for a guy called Jeremy Corbyn in the UK that demonstrates this perfectly. Excuse me. Now, when they polled people on who was going to vote for Corbyn, right? No one wanted to say that they didn't want to, okay, because there was like an intense moral pressure going on. This was sort of like vaguely around sort of before the BLM years, right? There was this intense moral pressure, okay? It'd be like phoning people up and asking them whether they're a racist, okay, right? Most people, they're just going to lie, okay, right? So that is what's called their professed preference. But then when the election comes around and they have to actually take action, you get another thing that is called revealed preference, right? And the revealed preference is what people actually do. And COVID was a great way of like looking at people's revealed preference. You got an actual, because they had to do something and not just say a thing, particularly under that kind of like pressure. You got to see how many people would actually, I mean, to use a term that the left really enjoy, back your words up with action, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely so. That's a situation where they're at a certain point when people are living in a certain amount of fear, they won't explain or tell you what they're actually thinking, which is of course what the right has been doing for years.
Yeah.
I mean, the right wing, not to get off another topic, but the right wing is used to living covertly, and the left wing is not. They're sort of in favor of the powers that be right now because of, whatever reason. Maybe they're just the army of flying monkeys to keep anybody who has questions about what's going on from speaking up. They're very scary people, and I think they're encouraged to be that way.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because if you look at like say like the Bolsheviks under the Tsar, right? It was a completely opposite situation to where we are now, right? Where the communists were hunted, they had to be like entirely covert, and as a result, they developed all of these covert strategies, right? Like much like the way the right has, they've got their own sort of like language and their own kind of like little signs and tells and all this kind of like other stuff, and having to live that way actually like imparts to you valuable skills. One of the problems that the left has sort of like had, apart from their general problem, which is always that they fight the man, and then when they win, they become the man, and they just freak out because they don't know how to be the man, because their entire philosophy is this idea of resistance, right? Their whole identity is built around being the underdog. It's a bit like a dog like chasing cars, and then when it finally catches one, it doesn't know what to do with it.
I was kind of waiting for your Joker impression to come out, but
I can't do a very good Joker impression.
Oh, that's fine. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking of that quote. Was like a dog chasing cars wouldn't know what to do with if I got one. Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, is that for? Oh, that's right. The Joker says that. Oh, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
totally forgot that. But yeah, but that's a really good, it's a really good way of putting it. And because the left, I mean, this is the thing, right? The left, when it generally winds up being led by, I mean, Lenin, of course, is the sort of the greatest example of this, right? Lenin knew what to do when he got into power, right? He wasn't going to really sort of, tell many people about it, right?
Right.
Like, but one of the interesting things about Lenin is that he does basically at a certain point just like write everything down. There's a book of his called The State and Revolution, and it's like, it's quite frankly like harrowing reading, especially in the current era where the sort of Bolshevik idea of class communism has been replaced by race communism. But he's like, oh yeah, we're going to get into power. We're going to like kill a whole bunch of people. We're going to like, like tear the state apart. Like, no. Um, and that's what they're doing. But again, because of democracy, um, generally they don't sort of say it out loud, right? And in fact, they do the opposite, right? Like, you can see this with the white replacement that's going on, right? For ages they're like, oh, it's not happening. The only people who believe that white populations are being like replaced are conspiracy theorists and racists, and the numbers keep ticking up and ticking up. And this idea of just like using conspiracy theory as a, what a thought terminating cliche is. You ever heard that
Yep.
term?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's basically like, shut up, like stop thinking about it. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. We don't need to examine this any further. And then sort of inevitably, right, they always pivot around to oh yeah, it's happened, or it's happening, and it's a good thing. So with the racial replacement stuff, for example, if you pay attention, you can see, because they sort of lay the groundwork a bit in advance. So there's this idea of the global majority, right? You see this sort of like kicking around if you're an autist like me and you read stuff from these like horrific white replacement think tanks. So at a certain point, once the white population gets low enough, all of a sudden they are going to abandon the mode of politics that has been sort of in the forefront for like the last 20 years, where everything must revolve around the minorities, right? Like, oh, minority this, minority that, we have to like look after the minority, no. And they'll do a 180 pivot, and they'll suddenly be like, well, actually, right, like, brown people generally are the majority, right? And we've got to stop constantly doing politics like based upon like minority opinion, and go back to like the true essence of democracy, which is the majority will. Right? Because and this is the other thing that really annoys me about people who sort of believe in, democracy, quote unquote. They seem to really believe that there is no such thing as people advancing a plan or objective secretly.
Yeah.
Right. Like just the idea that, so the first idea I think is partially a result of the sort of the kayfabe of democracy. Every 4 years we like vote, right? They cannot believe that anyone or any group could have a plan that is more than 4 years in length. Right. It's
Right.
retarded, right? Whereas
Right.
the truth of the matter is that there are groups that have long-term plans. Just look at the military. Right. If you say to people, oh, well, the military obviously has to have like long-term 20, 30-year plans, they can get their heads around that. But if you talk about a shadowy group prosecuting, like, for example, an ethnic war or a religious war or anything like that, their brain just switches off. They're just incapable of. And I think part of the reason why this is because the West and whites in particular have had so much of their history essentially like shorn from them, right? The ideal mass man is someone who basically doesn't really have a history, right? So like their history is like slavery bad, Holocaust bad, Vietnam War, war with Russia. Like that's basically all of their history, and all of these bits of history are really just there in order to enable sort of attachment and manipulation points, right? Like this is the thing about history. It is always political, because the lessons that you draw from history sort of evince or like necessitate certain opinions about the present. This is one of the reasons why history is so rigidly controlled, and why there's been so much effort into altering and changing history, because it's very, very important that mass man draws the conclusions from history that are convenient to the ruling regime, if you get what I'm saying.
Of course. Yeah. And I mean, that was part of that I heard years ago that you have to watch out for people who are too interested in history. I heard this on a Reddit post. They're like, there's people out there who like history, and then there's people out there who really like history, and you really want to watch out for them and don't get to know them. And that was back when I had the sense that they were going to take us to year zero and eliminate history altogether. This was back in 2016. I
Yeah.
became interested in history because I had a really good professor who explained everything leading up to the Russian Revolution, the Civil War, and did an excellent breakdown of World War II and what happened there. And it was the first time I'd ever heard it, and I was 20 years old. But it occurred to me while I was in that course that, like, oh, if everybody knew this and understood this, we'd have a completely different world, because the history that the average normie taking the bus gets is, like you said, just a few key events.
Yep.
And you could almost think of each of those sort of eras as a year zero.
Yeah.
One of my favorite podcasting series I ever listened to was from it's kind of a truthy podcast, but I really like it. Crow 777 with his co-host did a breakdown of the decades. And he was like, yeah, so everyone's noticed that not much has really changed except for the size of your phone in about 30 years.
Yeah.
But they were going through and they're like, but the 60s had a look and they had a sound, and the 70s had a look and they had a sound, and people wore different things, and the 80s had a look and a sound. But since 2000, we've just lost emo girls. That's like the only thing that's changed. Emo girls and smartphones is about it.
Man, I hate that they got rid of seeing girls.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think again, a lot of it is due to the anti-white stuff. I think that emo is a pure distillation of the white people, right?
Oh yeah.
Like no other culture would have come up with emo. And I've got a bit of a sort of an Uber theory on this, actually, right? I think that so one of the ways that I find is really good if you're confused about your relationship with the government, right? Just imagine a relationship with a completely psycho female, right? And I find this to be very, very clarifying, because most people have met or have had the experience of like dating like a psycho girl. I mean, I don't know, maybe the Zoomers now, they're hardly even dating, so like maybe even that is, but most of the same tricks, the gaslighting, the catastrophizing, the straight up lying, the threats of violence, are basically exactly the same. And I think that in the post-war period, what was really going on was that Western society was being attacked, and although people couldn't see it right directly, they could feel it. And this is one of the reasons why we sort of got the kind of like culture that we did, because these things sort of bleed out tangentially, right? So you get all these like weird horror movies, as Christianity is under attack, and obviously like you get a lot of Jewish directors like sort of, who really, really enjoy this, obviously, right?
Mhm.
I mean, movies like The Exorcist is a really, really good example, right? Like, in that movie, Christianity is basically powerless, right? Which of course is the central message. And I think that a lot of sort of goth, the sort of the very dissolute sort of nature of it, the sort of fronting of like, depression, everyone wearing black and all this kind of other stuff was
Oh yeah.
this sort of expression that society was like definitely fucked. But if anyone tried to like explain why, you'd get called a crazy person, basically, right? Like this, I mean, you still, it's not quite so much now because everyone, it has become apparent to a lot of people just how bad shit is, right? Um, but back in the day, people would just be like, "Oh, look, stop talking about it," right? I just want to like do drugs and go
Right.
and dance, you know?
Right. Okay. So that's actually leads into a theory that I've had before, which is that these expressions of darkness, whether it's in Radiohead or emo girls, or what we have now, where cars don't have colors and every apartment is painted millennial gray. To me, this is a subconscious expression of a state of mourning. It's a state of guilt and a state of loss. And I feel like that's only been growing in volume since World War II.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any way around that. And I mean, even from the time that I was like 6 or 7, even younger than that, anytime I saw a movie that was shot in the 60s or 70s, I hated it. It didn't matter how good it was. Like freaking Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I didn't really like it that much because it looked sad and it felt dirty. And there was something about that era that was so dark, but I was a kid. I had no idea what was going down in the 60s and 70s. There was just something revolting about it. Um, and to get back to what I was saying about it being a subconscious expression of mourning, this is how groups, crowds, nations, etc., tend to express themselves. It's in a malaise. It's in more of a what's the word? A miasma than it is a rational expression. It's just something's wrong and we all talk a certain way. Like, for example, I think Americans started talking dumber because they were told they talk dumb, right? They're like, you don't speak properly. And we went, yeah, okay, I guess we're stupid. And then you get American Pie and all of this stuff that comes out. And suddenly Americans are believing, well, I'm stupid. And I'm just like anybody. I'm just like all these other retards out here. So this must be funny, right? And it has this top down effect of like, I really do think if you tell people they're stupid for long enough, they'll believe it.
Well, I mean, yeah, but at the same time, there was a massive subversion of education. Um, I mean, this again is going back to the abusive girlfriend thing, right? They do bad stuff to you and then they blame you for the bad stuff that happens, right? They destroy your education system and then they turn around and be like, "Oh, you're so stupid." Well, yeah,
Right.
of course, right? You've just undermined the education system. If you go back to like before the Second World War and you look at the kinds of exam questions that were going around, it's insane. The quality of education has declined so precipitously. And I think it's a deliberate thing because what they want is an undifferentiated mass, right? Like they want a sort of an underclass that has no intelligence apart from, go here, do this. Now, I've talked with people about this, and they're like, "Well, why would they want that? That seems like a really bad way to run a society." But that's what the communists wanted, right? That's what the Bolsheviks wanted. That you see that a lot in socialist societies. You have a small elite that rule with complete power, right? The power of life and death over like anyone, and you have this sort of subjugated mass that can barely think for themselves, right? And if anyone who does think for themselves, they know to keep their fucking mouth shut, or like it's off to the gulag. Um, and I noticed this a lot. Not to sort of get too conspiratorial about the Jays, but this is also something that you see in sort of extreme forms of Judaism, right? That they want this sort of underclass, essentially, right? This sort of the goyim will be slaves, essentially, right? So they'll do like the manual labor and stuff, and switch their lights on and off on Shabbos, but they don't want them to actually have any sort of like real intelligence. And I think that one of the things that is underappreciated is that Judaism has become, in some ways, like Reform Judaism has become, in some ways, the default mode of a lot of Western civilizations, right? Like if you don't take the idea that religions like just spring out of nowhere, right? That there are only like a few of them, and that you just get repeating versions. Where did atheism spring from? Right? Atheism is not Christianity, right? Atheism is not Islam, right? You don't get atheist Muslims, you don't get atheist Christians, but you do get like atheist or agnostic Jews.
Right. To So I had a thought. I totally agree with you that the secularization of the West, so to speak, springs from Jewish thought, 100%. The other thing I wanted to throw at you, just because my mind has been racing, I've been taking so many notes while you've been talking. I like the psycho girlfriend picture, but it almost feels more like an evil stepmother to me. Like we've been taken in by somebody that hates us. And, it's like a Cinderella situation where you don't see what she can be because she's simultaneously being dumbed down and being told she's worthless at the same time. So, as far as like the education being destroyed, I think it's been destroyed and then we've been blamed for it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the other thing as well is that there has been a massive destruction of do you know what a telos is? You ever heard that term before?
Explain it for everybody.
Yeah, so a telos is like an end goal. Okay, right. So if you talk about an ideology and its teleology, it's like what is it aiming towards? What is its end point, right? And all ideologies, like all proper ideologies, have them. Okay, right. So you would say that the telos of communism is that that sort of stateless society where there's no money and everyone shares everything, right? I mean, as opposed to its actual telos, right, which is a rule by a small elite who like basically steal everything from everyone, right? Now, groups that have a powerful telos are extremely powerful. Okay, right? So if we talk about Islam, right? Islam's telos, right, is to spread the ummah, right, the Islamic community across the entire world. Okay. If you talk about the Jewish telos, the idea, at least the sort of like the Chabad sort of conservative Jews, the idea is to rule the entire world from Jerusalem and have sort of Jewish run courts in every single country, right? And also, if anyone's like curious about this, I did a video on the world to come, the Olam Haba, and sort of the telos or the outcome of sort of rabbinical Judaism. You might find that very interesting. It's very different to what they say it is if you actually look at their sources. Now,
Hold that thought. Hold that
Mhm.
thought. I want to confirm that what you're saying is absolutely true, and you don't have to read conspiracy books to know it.
Yeah,
It's straight from the horse's mouth. You just have to read their books. They say it
correct.
openly. This isn't even like, oh God, did you know this horrible thing? This is just a doctrine that they've been following for a really long time.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to underline that because I know it can sound like we're just being I don't know, edgy or something like that. That's the truth.
yeah,
And you have to settle that with yourself. And there's no reason either to get upset about it to start. You can get upset about it later, but to start, go read it, understand it.
or
And
check out my video.
check out the video.
In about an hour, I'll give you sort of like the lowdown on it. I guess maybe you can stick it in the description. The video.
100%. I'll put the link in the description because I listened to it and was that the one you sent me?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was really a really good breakdown of it.
So Christianity, right? Like what is the telos of the West now, right? Well, I would argue its telos has been completely broken, right? Because the thing about Christianity, generally speaking, too, is it doesn't have a sort of world conquering teleology, right? And I would submit that what has happened is that the teleology of the West, right, which I think used to basically be like, let's make our country strong, like let's keep everybody white, let's like do good things for our nation, has been completely subverted. And now you've got this whole sort of like thing in the West where their telos basically is to go around the world and spread, quote unquote democracy, whatever the fuck that means, right? In other countries, right? So if you look at the Ukraine war, is a really, really good example of this, okay? All the European countries are basically on the verge of bankruptcy at this point, right? They're all being invaded by like, millions and millions of migrants, right? Do they focus on securing their own borders? Fuck no, right? But they'll absolutely focus on securing the borders of Ukraine, right? And this is one of the things I think that made Trump very, very popular. I mean, you can argue how effective he's being, but at least Trump is like, oh yeah, we need to secure our own borders as well. I mean, he's probably still going to go to war with Iran, right? For democracy, for Israel, right? Like let's not beat around the bush, right? America has no reason to attack Iran. It is Israel that wants to attack Iran. Okay, and so this people feel this, but they can't sort of articulate it. And I think this is one of the reasons why there's been such an attack on education and this idea of conspiracy theory, right? Like to the normie, the idea that you could stage a plan that has more than one step is a conspiracy theory. It is honestly like so retarded, right? Like if you say to someone, okay, we have a plan, right? First we're going to do this thing, then we're going to do that thing, then we're going to do that thing, right? So you have 3 or 4 step plan, right? That's automatically a conspiracy theory, right? To the normie mind, the only kind of plan that can be countenanced is just that with one step. It is so fucking retarded. I can't even, right? Like,
I mean, what I'll say is that Japanese companies lay out business plans for centuries.
yes,
This is well known, but we don't do that kind of thing over here because we're trained to be short-sighted, domesticated creatures. That's really the saddest part of it.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And we are encouraged to be as short term as possible.
yes.
And I think this, to circle back to democracy, I think this benefits sort of, the quote unquote, this is very dangerous for our democracy people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what does that phrase even mean now, right? Like again, not to be too spicy, but it seems to me that if you just replace democracy as beneficial to the Jewish oligarchy, you actually you're going to get a much more accurate answer in a lot of cases, because a lot of these people, they're like, oh, this is very dangerous to our democracy. What the fuck does that even mean? I've seen people say, effectively fair voting is dangerous to our democracy, right? Well, they're clearly using the word in another way, right? Now, if you shorten everyone's time frame down, you can focus everybody on this idea that the next election, right? Which, I mean, in the US, it's basically every 2 years because you've got the midterms as well, right? That will relieve your suffering, right? Like all of the problems, right? Like, because again, another thing with this short-termism is the idea that all of the solutions are also short-term. We'll just vote this person into office and everything will get better. My brother in Christ, these problems have been brewing for 30, 40 years. They will not be easily fixed. And to actually fix them would require an amount of like stern violence that no one is willing to countenance. Well, I feel like people are starting to come around to it, to be perfectly honest, right? Like, we're going to get, I mean, obviously the lefties are like all about this. We're going to have a revolution, like, no. But to the normies, they have been lulled into this idea that, that, I don't know, that these severe problems have mild solutions, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Let's talk about lefties for a minute because it's one of my favorite topics, because they are I think what's I don't want to say frightens me, but disturbs me the most about them is that they're extremely heavily brainwashed and they're convinced that they're the opposite. They really believe that they are enlightened and freed from religion and patriarchy and I don't know, white males or something like that. I don't know what it is that they have going on in their head, except that they think they're smarter than everyone else. And they also envision themselves as being like some kind of of a resistance group, even though they are the the group that's in power, whether regardless of whether, to them, they think that because Trump is the president, that they're not in power. That's ridiculous. I mean, I keep hearing from leftists that Republicans run the news. Have you heard this one?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course. I mean,
What the hell?
have you ever heard the term Holocaustianity?
I have, yeah.
Right. So again, to the listeners, right? The actual religion that most normies in the West exist in is Holocaustianity, right? Which is a version of Christianity where they have replaced Satan with Hitler. But there's no redemption, there's no forgiveness, there's no being saved. It's like it's just the worst of all worlds, right? And you can see this very, very, very clearly, because if you are in a group of these people and you make an edgy joke about Satan, no one's going to bat an eyelid. Make an edgy joke about Hitler, right? And they will absolutely like kick off. They've just replaced Satan with Hitler. And the reason why they've done this is because, well, I mean, again, there's a big influence of Judaism here. The idea that you can create a heaven on earth, essentially. And the way that you do this is you go around and you destroy the Hitler of the moment. So that's why, Saddam Hussein was Hitler, and then Slobodan Milosevic was Hitler, and Muammar Gaddafi was Hitler, right? Like everyone that you want to take out is Hitler. So this is an aberration of religion. It's not a real religion. It just exists in the religion part of the brain. The truth of the matter is that everybody is religious, right? It is a part of the deep structure of the brain. And if you do not choose the religion that you are part of, someone else will choose it for you. And a lot of these lefties, they've had this religion chosen for them. And basically in their religious mind, the worst, the devil, the epitome of evil is Hitler and the Holocaust, and the sort of heaven, I guess, is like communism or something. It's very, very, very vaguely defined, like what the end state or the sort of the telos is. It tends to be like we'll overthrow the government, ... profit, this is just it's just incredibly useful, because you can just galvanize people. You see it all the time in if you, I mean, I've been watching a ton of these protests in Minneapolis. It's always the same cry: you're a Nazi, you're a Hitler, you're this, that, the other. Because in functional terms, what that means now is anyone who impedes the progress of communism, really, right?
Right.
So
100%.
so the greatest evil that you can do is to impede the progress of communism.
Right. So what's that? I don't know what the show is, but I've seen the memes, the free rent or something like that.
Free rent.
Yeah.
Free rent.
You ever see that meme where it's like they don't use words, or they use words to trick humans or something like that?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the anime?
I don't watch anime.
No, okay, this anime you should, right? It's about the first half of the first season. The rest of it's a bit gay, right? But the first half of the first season is like amazing, right? They're traveling through the countryside and they come across this city state, and they're being attacked by demons, right? And these demons, they take human form, but they have no human emotion. They just lie. And it's done really, really well. So for example, they're like negotiating with the king or the prince, and this guy, he's got to negotiate with someone who killed his father, I think, or his brother or his son, someone like close to him. And the demon's like, oh, I'm very sorry, like nah. And then the prince leaves the room, and the demon is there with his child, and they're just like, as soon as they let us in the city gates, we're going to kill all of them. Right. And this is what, and Frieren is the only person who understands that these demons, they're not human, right? They just make human noises. Their goal is just to kill everyone. That's why you get the meme. Yeah.
Right. And that I had a big think there. and I need to write this down because I'm not sure it's fully developed, but let me throw it at you and see what you think. So in communication, words can be sounds and signals, but they can also be used to allow a person to think out loud and form rational arguments. Uh, Signals. Yeah. See, this is why it's not fully developed. I'm gonna have to put on my thinking cap after we're done. But the left appears to communicate in noises, and they don't communicate in arguments. They think of words as things that they can use to get what they want. And
I
the
mean,
right,
sorry, go on.
oh, I was gonna say the right thinks of, well, this is all very general. I know. I'm not trying to do left-right stuff, but what I'm trying to say is that right-wing, logical thinking kinds of people use words to form complex thoughts and ideas and then test them. But that's not how everyone uses words. Do you get where I'm going with this? I
I
know
I,
it's not,
I do. You ever read Baudrillard?
I don't. I haven't, no.
Oh, mate. So Baudrillard was this French thinker. He really famously wrote this book called Simulation and Simulacra.
Ah, yes, I
Um,
have read that. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Baudrillard was of this opinion that essentially you can get this state of abstraction of things. Local distance actually described this like really well with like a strawberry, right? So you start with like a strawberry, you pick it up off the ground, it's like a real thing, right? Then someone takes the strawberry and they make like a strawberry flavored candy. Okay, so it's like 1 degree of abstraction. Then somebody else makes like a milkshake that is the flavor of the strawberry candy, right? And if someone has grown up only like, far away from the farm, they've never seen like a real strawberry, right? To them, strawberry is the flavor of the candy flavored milkshake, right? At which point you have moved into simulation. And I think what you're trying to describe is that a lot of people on the left, um, they're not grounded. So if instead of the strawberry farm, for example, we take something like family, right? Like having a child, or caring for an animal, or right, like living on a farm, something like actually like real, or war, for example. War is like the realest fucking thing that there is, right?
Right.
And you just remove so that, and I think this is one of the big problems. I see it in America. I actually, in fact, I saw this coming in America for like fucking years, man. I went to this like this panel discussion. I think it must have been 4 or 5 years ago now. And I like stood up and I'm like, listen, given that it's very, very clear that there are 2 groups in America and they don't even speak the same language anymore. I mean, sure, they both speak English, but functionally they're not speaking the same language at all. How do you think that civil war is not inevitable? And the panel was like, okay, that's not true at all. But I was right. I was absolutely fucking right. You're winding up with a lot of these leftist people, and okay, so let's just take the term Nazi as a really, really good example of this, right? None of these people, right, have even know anything about National Socialism, right? They don't know really anything about World War II, the lead up to World War II, right? The Spartacus Revolution. Oh yeah. For listeners who are not aware of this, by the way, right? The Bolsheviks nearly overthrew Germany in 1918, right? And the Weimar Republic, which resulted, was a compromise between the Kaiser and the communists, right? So this idea that like the National Socialists just emerged like sprung out of the ground fully formed is like bullshit, right? Germany was in this state of like perpetual civil conflict, low grade civil conflict for like 30 years before, like 20 years before this like all kicked off, right? So they've never seen a Nazi. They don't really know what any of it is, or that maybe they've watched like the History Channel, or they right. And so it's become like just abstracted and abstracted and abstracted to now they see like an American wearing a red cap, right? Or like a policeman, and they're like, that's a Nazi. No, it's not, right? Like you don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. But it's become excuse me, it's become an emotional sort of like driver. And I think, again, to circle back, what all of this is this howl of pain of many of these people who have been promised stuff continually by like part of the democratic process, right? You vote us in, everything will get better, but it never does. It never does, right? You get all of these people who have like been sold like the lie of like feminism. Oh, look, just just fuck as many people as you want. You can want to have kids someday, then you wind up 35, 40, you're alone. And this howl of pain, this, I guess I think that communists would call it revolutionary energy, right? Just exists, and there's no way back. These people have ruined their lives effectively, right? But they trusted the feminism, they trusted the science, they believed what these people said about men, for example, right? Which is like, really, like, don't ever take advice on relationships from feminists. They've got no idea what the fuck they're talking about, right? They're like the most disastrous advice you could ever get in life is listening to feminists tell you about like, oh, what men want, and how to like build a relationship, and no, and you don't need to have kids. Like, where was I going with this? Yeah, right. The hyper reality is so that's what Baudrillard called it, right? Like when you have moved completely away from reality, when you have detached from reality completely, when all of your moorings have been undermined and you've essentially sort of just levitated into your sort of own bubble of like fart sniffing or whatever you'd want to call it, right? That is the hyper reality. It bears no relationship to reality at all. It is entirely self-referential, and a lot of leftist language is basically like this. This is one of the reasons why it makes no sense, and why a lot of them sound like they're basically like an LLM, right?
Yeah.
Because they're just
Yes.
attaching words like one after another, and there's never any reference to the underlying reality whatsoever. It's like if Google Maps went woke, for example, okay, right? And started like changing Google Maps based upon ideological principles, right? They're like, oh, we're not going to list this road because that road is like racist, right? And like,
Yeah.
and then after you run this for like 10 years, and you wind up with Google Maps that doesn't tell you fucking anything about reality whatsoever, right? You'll be driving around down the street and Google Maps says, oh, there's a bridge there, but there's not a bridge there. The bridge has been put there because ideologically the bridge should be there, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. Mr. Fist, are you suggesting that me having memorized every single Pokemon has not prepared me for a camping trip in the wilderness?
I don't know, man, right? Like, you look, if you don't have to learn how to start a fire, right? You could just like whip out your Charizard card, right? And like focus very intently on it, right?
If I need a fire, I'll just go catch a Charizard. I mean, really, like, what are we talking about here? But this is, again, why they seem so detached and why they're so hard to talk to is because they don't have their feet on the ground anymore, and they're living in a simulation. Their logic makes sense in the simulation, but it's fundamentally disconnected from almost everything real.
Yeah.
And that's why they seem so topsy-turvy to normal people who have been raised in a Christian society, or at least the ruins of a Christian society.
Well, I mean, this is the other thing too, right? Like, okay, you can say that any ideological construct, or indeed sort of any observational construct, is not going to be reality, okay, right? And because humans are like this, right? They abstract and they summarize and all this kind of other stuff. But you can say that certain ideological structures have a greater or lesser correspondence to reality, if that makes sense, right? And the ones that the leftists are running at the moment have basically zero, right? Like, it's like you go into a 7-Eleven and you pick up a bag of, I don't know, shredded wheat. And you look on the back, contains 0 shredded wheat, and like 150, right? Like, additives and, sort of, highly processed wheat byproduct or something like that, right? Yeah. That's basically where they're at. They're consuming the Monster energy drink version of reality effectively. And this is why I think that war is people are going to hate me saying this. I think actually sometimes war is a good thing, because war is one of those things that tests how grounded in reality both sides are, right? You look back at history, you see this like a fair bit, right? You get two countries, they start talking smack at each other, and say one of those countries is existing in a complete bubble, right? They're completely detached from reality. Their ruling class is detached from reality, right? Because they've set everything up. But on the battlefield, reality intrudes, right? You can't win a war with ideological words, right? You can't just be like, oh, you're Nazis and we're gonna defeat you. No, you need blood and iron and gold, right? Actual reality to prevail to prevail on the battlefield. And so I think war is actually one of these things that actually sorts out which reality model has greater connection with actual reality, if you get what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. My thought is that for this particular group of brainwashed people, even that won't break them free. It will only enrage them. This is my feeling on it. It's almost like, the movie I had playing in my head was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Uh, did you
Not
ever
sure.
see that?
Not sure if I saw that actually.
There's
Wait, is that the one where he gets the cup, the Holy
yeah, the Holy
Grail?
Grail. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he has to rescue his father from a castle.
Uh-huh.
And the first thing that happens is he busts through a window and they get found by a group of Nazis. And Indiana Jones steals a machine gun and shoots them all. And his own dad is like, "Look what you did! I can't believe what you did!" And then he's like dragging him out the door, and he has to like keep doing this fight, even though his dad's in the way and even sneering at him the whole time. And eventually, his dad learns that this is war. You have to fight, you have to shoot back, and that sort of thing. The reason I was thinking of that is because the reason his dad is that way is because he's an academic and he
Yeah.
lives in a world of words. And
Yeah.
war to him was something he read about in a history book or when he was translating some Greek or something like that. But when it comes to actually getting into it and shooting people who are threatening you, that sort of thing, it all becomes very real. But just like COVID, I feel like the leftist delusion at first shut up because it didn't know what to do. And then it very quickly reorganized and then turned into just a, I love the word that you used, howl. It's a howl of pain. It's not a war cry. It's not directed toward anything except for the nearest target. The only thing that these people know to attack is anything that's white, male, Christian, etc. And they tell you this all the time. Now,
Yeah,
why are they interested in those things? Is it because they actually rationally oppose them? No, it's because they've been directed to do that their entire lives.
yeah, it's like when you train an attack dog, right? And you selectively abuse it. So that it gets really, really angry. And then you point it towards your enemy, right?
Mhm.
Dog doesn't really care. The dog doesn't really know. All the dog knows, right, is that it's been treated poorly. It's very angry, right, and that that's the target it should go for, right? Like calling these people attack dogs is actually a very accurate way of doing it, like of describing it.
Well,
Um,
selective abuse is the perfect word.
yeah, yeah.
Because I do see these people as like an abused, tormented uh body of creatures. Like I'm not is that dehumanizing? I really do see them as a zombie horde. And
Well,
I for
yeah.
years, you would say that as a joke. Oh, so the zombies are out again. And now I'm just like, when you talk to them, even on an individual level, they got that look in their eyes that's just glassed over, and it's just like you've been MK Ultra. I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a horrible way to run a country. It's a really, like, to abuse your own population in such a fashion. And I think this is one of the other reasons why, like, there's been so much splitting going on. They don't want any kind of cohesive civilizational identity. I mean, the weird thing is, right, like, what they call shit, like, white supremacy and racism and stuff is basically like everyone before, I don't know, 1960, 1970. Everyone was like that, right? Everyone was like, you stick with your own group, you look after your own group. And this is the big feature of I guess what you would call mass man. I forget who it was who came up with that phrase. The perfectly atomized individual, right? They have no sort of real close ties. They have no family. They have no history. They have no culture. Everything they believe is essentially 100% synthetic, and they sort of clump together in this sort of weird free floating plasma, just waiting for their masters to flick the switch and be like, go get him, champ, right? Go, attack these people. There'll be, communism and sugar cookies for you when it's over.
Oh my gosh. There's such chilling imagery going through my head as we're talking about this, because again, it's like I really do see them, and this isn't to be sympathetic at all because I think we're way past that. But it is sort of like a huddled, abused group of creatures that have just been brainwashed and tormented their entire lives and said, it's not us that's doing this to you, it's you and your inherent qualities of, say, being white or being male, and you have to make up for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the creepy, nasty nature of all of this. Is like, there was a time when I could feasibly look at some of these people and say, you have no idea what it would be like to live with leadership that didn't just openly hate you. You don't know what that's like. None of us know what that's like, to live in countries where the government is looking out for our good and isn't trying to abuse us to get us as a mass weapon or whatever to do what they want.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a amazing quote from, I don't know who it's from. I keep seeing it pop up on Twitter. It's from like during the USSR, and this guy's like, the plenary, like, voted for this thing, and it didn't go the way they wanted, so they called another vote, and this guy's like, wouldn't it be more prudent to abolish the people and just elect another? And that's essentially what they're doing. You know what I mean, right? Like, they're like, well, you guys are like annoying. We would much rather. I think it all comes down to the IQ gap. This is also like a sort of professed kind of like Jewish thing, right? That in their sort of like ideal future, right, they would be the only intelligent ones left, right? It would just be like them, with a history, with a telos, with an understanding of advanced technology, particularly an understanding of mass persuasion methods and stuff. And then just an entire sort of sea of people just moved and manipulated by the tides of of their whims and wishes. And like, did you ever play Ghost of Tsushima at all?
No, my brother did though.
Really good game. Okay, so it starts off right, like you're the main character, Jin Sakai. He's like a child, and I think his father's been killed, and he's given into the care of the local daimyo, and he's on horseback, like riding to the daimyo's like castle or village or whatever, right? And he there's this like amazing shot. He like rides in or walks in, and there are like people like lining the road, and like soldiers, and they're all at attention, and like this clearly very well run society. Everyone like knows their place. It's very, very fruitful. And the first time I like played it, I was like, fascism, because quite frankly, that's really what a lot of these people, like the definition of fascism has just been stretched to just mean any well run homogenous society that isn't completely in flux. You could say that they have basically queered society, right? To go back to the Lindsayeites and their definition, right? Like society is now an identity without an essence, right? There is no, they like to do this to America, specifically. Oh, America is just an economic zone. It's what do they call it? A covenantal country, right? Like, so it wasn't built by like whites, right? It's just an economic zone, right? Like anyone can come there. They do this with the UK as well, right? Like people are starting to ask, well, if you took every single Englishman out of England and you replaced them with Indians, right, would it change? And they try and say with a straight face, oh yeah, well, as long as they had the right values, nothing about it would change. You're like, What the fuck are you talking about?
It's
This is
utterly
the
unreal.
depths. This is the depths to which this is the retardation to which a lot of people have like sunk, basically.
And it's hard to put a measure on it because again, even you and me, even people who listen to our stuff, right? These are people who have at least some awareness of what's going on. These are people who are sort of probably trying to do their best to undo the short-sightedness stuff. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
we're all still suffering under it. Have you ever read Gustave Le Bon?
I haven't, but I used to have a friend who was really, really into Le Bon.
I'm reading his book Crowds right now for my patrons.
Uh-huh.
And the first chapter is utterly unreal. I'd like to close on this if I can. There's just a teeny tiny little bit
Yeah, go for it.
I want to read from the very end of it. So he's basically describing crowds as being these, it has to be treated as a separate consciousness. And people form this separate outside consciousness just in general by being together. And there's crowds that are made up of people who look alike, are homogenous, racially. He uses these words because it was published in 1895. But for the whole first chapter, it's sort of a black pill. It's like, yeah, you're surrounded by people who are basically zombies and that sort of thing. And the best thing you can do with them is keep them from killing you. Basically. It's really fantastic. But he ends on this surprising note. And so, like I say, for pages and pages and pages, he's just like, yeah, you have to understand that, like, the reason they do product taxes, or they're trying to do product taxes, because the crowd can't understand, oh, there's a few cents taken here and there from, when you buy food or whatever. If they saw the whole bill at once, they'd kill you. So you have to just take it a little bit at a time and don't interrupt the crowd's habits, right?
Right.
But so because it's an old book, it's a little loquacious. But I'm going to start here. By the mere fact that he forms part of an organized crowd, a man descends several rungs in the ladder of civilization. Isolated, he may be a cultivated individual. In a crowd, he is a barbarian, that is, a creature acting by instinct. He possesses the spontaneity, the violence, the ferocity, and also the enthusiasm and heroism of primitive beings, whom he further tends to resemble by the facility with which he allows himself to be impressed by words and images, which would be entirely without action on each of the isolated individuals composing the crowd, and to be induced to commit acts contrary to his most obvious interests and best known habits. An individual in a crowd is a grain of sand amid other grains of sand, which the wind stirs up at will. It is for these reasons that juries are seen to deliver verdicts of which each individual juror would disapprove, that parliamentary assemblies adopt laws and measures of which each of their members would disapprove in his own person. Taken separately, the men of the convention were enlightened citizens of peaceful habits. United in a crowd, they did not hesitate to give their adhesion to the most savage proposals, to guillotine individuals most clearly innocent, and, contrary to their interests, to renounce their inviolability and to decimate themselves. It is not only by his acts that the individual in a crowd differs essentially from himself. Even before he has entirely lost his independence, his ideas and feelings have undergone a transformation, and the transformation is so profound as to change the miser into a spendthrift, the skeptic into a believer, the honest man into a criminal, and the coward into a hero. The renunciation of all its privileges, which the nobility voted in a moment of enthusiasm during the celebrated night of August 4th, 1789, would certainly never have been consented to by any of its members taken singly. The conclusion to be drawn from what precedes is that the crowd is always intellectually inferior to the isolated individual, but that from the point of view of feelings and of the acts these feelings provoke, the crowd may, according to circumstances, be better or worse than the individual. All depends on the nature of the suggestion to which the crowd is exposed. This is the point that has been completely misunderstood by writers who have only studied crowds from the criminal point of view. Doubtless a crowd is often criminal, but also it is often heroic. It is crowds rather than isolated individuals that may be induced to run the risk of death to secure the triumph of a creed or an idea, that may be fired with enthusiasm for glory and honor, that are led on almost without bread and without arms, as in the age of the Crusades to deliver the tomb of Christ from the infidel, or as in 93 to defend the fatherland. Such heroism is without a doubt somewhat unconscious, but it is of such heroism that history is made. Were peoples only to be credited with the great actions performed in cold blood, the annals of the world would register but few of them.
Damn.
Doesn't that make you want to read it?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, right? Like that is really, really profound. I mean, I would argue that sort of crowd collective action thing is very, very deeply rooted in human psychology, and this is one of the reasons why the technocrats hate this idea of populism. You must have heard the term populism. You know, Trump is a populist. Like, no. And to the mind of the technocrat, the idea of stirring the crowd up to collective action is the worst thing of all. I mean, of course, this is untrue. They love to stir the crowd to collective action as long as it's in their interest, right? Look at COVID, okay? But when the crowd is stirred to action for goals that they do not approve, for example, like, you know, opposing mass migration or something like that, then suddenly it's populism. And it's interesting that populism, via the mechanism which you describe, is politics. It really is. If you go back to Aristotle, the idea of being able to sway the crowd through rhetoric, right, is like, it's a fundamental form of politics. You could argue that civilization can't really even exist without it, right? Like, how do you prosecute a war, right? How do you even have an election? Right, the conceit in the post-war era is this idea of this sort of contained populism, right, where like all strong emotions are removed from the populace, right? Everything is proceduralized, right? There is no longer any existential conflict between any groups. And as we are seeing in the West, this is a lie. It's always been a lie. And this dream of like a technocratic future in which there will never be any strong feelings, there will never be any strong group associations is just death, in my opinion.
Totally agree. Mr. Fist, where can people find you?
Oh, you can find all of my stuff at newsfist.net. You can search for me on YouTube, but if you do, you've got to put it in quotes, because otherwise you get this Sri Lankan news channel, News First, which is like,
that wasn't you. I was watching it the other day and I'm like, I don't remember him looking like this.
yeah, my SEO sucks. I don't know. I should like change my name. It's too late now. I've grown used to it. Yes, you can find all of my stuff on newsfist.net. There's a bunch of stuff on there that you might enjoy. There's like a whole series of Empire of Lies, which is a show I did with Years the Eunuch, where we explore sort of complicated political topics like, you know, anarcho-tyranny, and there's one on parasitic influences on behavior. It's highbrow stuff. And of course, my current series, Fistery, which is every Monday at 8 o'clock London time. I'm covering like the Black Death at the moment, because there's just a lot. It's basically me reading sort of contemporary accounts from like way back in history and just how weird they are.
Well, like I said, he's a man who wears many hats. If you want the highbrow stuff, I recommend Fistery. And if you want the more amusing stuff, I can't recommend enough Artie and Fist. It's hilarious.
Oh yeah, I didn't mention Artie and Fist. Yeah, that's right. So I'm so fucking busy right now. Yeah, and so twice a week as well, I do a stream with Rhetorically Defective, Artie and Fist. Check that out. You might enjoy it.
Yeah, if you like spicy humor, that's the place to go. Sometimes I literally have to pause it because I'm laughing too hard, and I swear I'm not blowing smoke. That's just the truth. Some of the shit you guys find on there is utterly obscene.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us again, Newsfist. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, we should do this again, mate. This is a lot of fun. You take care, all right?